Welcome to Podcast 3000, the place for meaningful chats and talks on the net. Enjoy our food for thought.
The Deep Dive is back. Today, Erica and David are talking about Thomas Schwarz and one of his essays. Schwarz is an author, journalist, and freedom activist. He challenges us to look at everyday political and social issues from a new perspective, and he explains to us why we all have to fight for our liberal democracy every day. Erica and David, now it's your turn.
Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today we're diving into an essay, and it's by Thomas Schwarz.
Oh, yeah.
He's a German author and journalist.
Okay.
And he's grappling with the meaning of a specific date in German history, and it's November 9th.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you see, this date marks two really important but drastically different events.
Yeah.
So we've got the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989.
Right.
A moment of pure joy and liberation.
Absolutely.
But then also the Kristallnacht pogroms in 1938.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a night of just horrific violence against Jewish people.
It's a powerful juxtaposition, isn't it? And Schwarz uses this to examine Germany's responsibility, both for confronting its past and for upholding what he calls liberal democracy in the present.
Okay, so let's unpack that term for a second.
Sure.
This liberal democracy, what does he mean by that?
He's talking about a system of government that prioritizes individual rights and freedoms.
Okay.
So things like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and protection from, government overreach.
Yeah.
It's the kind of system that was under attack on Kristallnacht, but then ultimately triumphed with the fall of the Berlin Wall.
So Schwarz is saying that even though these two Novembers seem like worlds apart,
Right.
they're actually connected by this struggle for liberal democracy.
Exactly. And he asks some tough questions, too.
Okay.
For example, he points out that the joy of German reunification is, forever shadowed by the memory of the Holocaust.
Right.
And he even highlights a disturbing fact. A lot of Germans just remained passive during Kristallnacht.
Wow.
A silence he considers a part of their collective responsibility.
It makes you wonder, does he even think it's possible to truly commemorate both events on the same date?
Yeah, he wrestles with that question. Can you celebrate freedom while acknowledging the immense suffering of the past? It raises really complex questions about memory guilt and the burden of history, especially for Germany.
And it sounds like he's challenging modern-day Germany to grapple with this legacy, not just on a national level, but a personal one, too.
Absolutely. And he goes even further, drawing some unsettling parallels between Germany's past and the current global landscape.
Okay.
So, for example, he compares Hitler using the 1936 Berlin Olympics for propaganda to Putin doing the same thing during the 2014 Sochi Winter Games.
That's a bold claim.
Yeah.
How does he connect those two events?
Well, he points out a chilling similarity in the timelines.
Okay.
The Sochi Olympics ended on February 23, 2014, and just days later, Putin orders the invasion and annexation of Crimea.
Wow.
Schwarz argues that this land grab mirrors Hitler's expansionist moves after the Berlin Games.
Isn't it a bit of a stretch to compare Putin to Hitler, though?
Right.
I mean, Putin might be an authoritarian figure, but surely he's not on the same level as Hitler?
Yeah, he acknowledges that the situations aren't identical.
Right.
But he is deeply troubled by what he sees as this pattern of aggression.
Okay.
And a disturbingly familiar global response, or a lack thereof.
What do you mean? How did the world react to Putin's actions in Crimea?
Schwarz argues that the world's response was very muted, much like the silence during the rise of Nazi Germany.
Huh.
He sees this as a dangerous pattern of complacency in the face of authoritarianism, and he directly challenges the reader, asking if they see these parallels too.
Interesting.
It's a way of forcing us to confront our own potential for inaction.
So he's not just looking back at history. He's using it to critique the present. Even holding a mirror up to his readers.
Exactly.
That's thought-provoking. But he doesn't stop there, does he? He also takes aim at specific people in Germany today.
Right.
Criticizing their stance on current events like the war in Ukraine.
Yes. He becomes very pointed in his criticism of certain figures who he believes are failing to uphold the values of liberal democracy. One of his primary targets is the AfD, the Alternative for Germany Party.
So Schwarz really zeroes in on the AfD here. What's his main critique? Could you give us some context on who they are and why they're drawing his ire?
The AfD is a right-wing populist party that has been gaining traction in Germany. Schwarz labels them as Putin supporters and takes issue with their stance on the war in Ukraine. He specifically mentions their demand that Ukraine should just cede Crimea to Russia.
So they're siding with the aggressor. I can see why Schwarz would find that troubling.
Exactly. He sees their position as a betrayal of the very principles that Germany should be championing, especially given its own history.
Right.
But he doesn't just focus on political parties.
Oh.
He also calls out individuals like Sarah Wagenknecht, a controversial ex-politician.
What's the issue with Wagenknecht? Is it just that she's a former politician?
It's more than that. Schwarz criticizes her for what he sees as a naive and dangerous underestimation of Putin's intentions before the invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah.
He points to comments she made just days before the invasion where she downplayed Putin's aggression. He believes that Germany, of all countries, should be acutely aware of the dangers of appeasing authoritarian leaders. And it's not just those past comments either. Schwarz also finds her current political stance concerning. She's been really vocal against Germany's support for Ukraine,
Okay.
Arguing that it's only making the war last longer.
So in a way, she's echoing the AfD, even though she's not with them officially.
That's a good point. While their motivations might be different, they both seem to be pushing for a policy that would basically reward Putin for being aggressive.
And Schwarz sees this as a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Right? Like a failure to stand up for these values.
Exactly. He worries that this kind of thinking, just normalizes appeasement and really undermines a free and open society. And Wagenknecht isn't the only one he calls out.
Oh.
There's also a well-known German intellectual named Richard Precht.
Okay, what's Prick's story? What did he say?
Well, Schwarz takes issue with some of Precht's public statements, where he suggests that Ukraine should think about surrendering to Russia.
Oh, wow, that's controversial.
Yeah.
Especially coming from someone in Germany.
Yeah, Precht hosts a pretty popular podcast on ZDF, one of Germany's main public TV channels.
Okay.
So what he says matters.
Yeah, I can see why Schwarz would be concerned about that, especially given Germany's history and the need to learn from the past.
Right. It brings us back to his main point about November 9th. It's a stark reminder that freedom isn't just given. It's something you have to defend.
He's saying we can't just sit back and enjoy democracy. We have a responsibility to protect it.
Exactly. He contrasts the fall of the Berlin Wall, where people fought hard for their freedom, with how passive so many Germans were during Kristallnacht.
Like he's saying, we're always caught between those two Novembers, between freedom and oppression.
And he wants us to choose resistance, to never just assume we'll always be free.
So just voting isn't enough. What does he want people to do?
He wants people to be more involved, to speak up, hold their leaders accountable, and really defend democratic principles.
He even called out Wagenknecht for this,
Yeah.
right? Didn't she learn to agitate back in East Germany?
Yeah, he uses her as an example of how even someone who lived through oppression can forget and even turn against the very freedoms they fought for.
Huh.
He says she's using the freedom of a democratic society to try and destroy that very system.
Wow. It's kind of a paradox. A warning for all of us who live in democracies. We can't just assume freedom is a guarantee. It needs constant attention and participation.
Exactly. And Schwarz isn't just talking about Germany. He's calling on all citizens to act.
Like we're all in this fight together. If democracy fails somewhere, it affects everyone.
And being complacent is the most dangerous thing.
So what's his message for our listeners? What does he want them to take away from all this?
I think it's this. Don't just stand by and watch. Get involved in politics, hold your leaders accountable, and speak out against injustice. Democracy needs active and informed citizens.
It's a good message. It sums up his essay well.
Yeah, he's reminding us that the fight for freedom never really ends. It needs our constant attention and work.
It's serious but empowering too. Knowing we can shape the future and make sure November 9th is a symbol of hope and progress makes you think differently about how we remember these big moments in history, huh? Schwarz is saying it's not just about speeches and stuff. It's about doing something.
Right. He sees remembering as a call to action, like a challenge to actually live up to the ideals of November 9th, 1989.
But what about the other November 9th? The one that's like a dark part of German history?
Yeah.
How does he connect those two things?
He doesn't ignore that darkness. He actually says both of those Novembers are like beacons, showing us how fragile but also how strong liberal democracy can be.
That's a powerful image. Two beacons shining on different paths. And we get to choose which one to follow.
Exactly. And for Schwarz, the way forward means always being watchful, facing hard truths, and being committed to freedom and justice.
So going back to those people he criticized, how do they fit into this bigger idea of protecting democracy? What's the connection there?
He uses Wagenknecht and Precht as warnings. He says they're complacent, they downplay the threats to democracy, and that's a problem for everyone.
So he's saying it's not enough to just be against something like authoritarianism. You have to be for something, for the things that protect our freedoms.
Yeah, and he wants us to do more than just say we support it. He wants us to be loud, to challenge people who hurt democracy, and to hold our leaders responsible.
So a more involved and informed citizenry, one that gets out there and makes things better.
Exactly. That's what the legacy of November 9th needs, both the good and the bad.
So as we finish this deep dive, is there a question we can leave our listeners with? Something from Schwartz's essay that makes them think about their role in all this?
How about this? Thinking about those two sides of November 9th. What can you actually do in your own life to protect and strengthen democracy today?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It makes us think about history, but also do something about it.
Because like Schwartz says, freedom's future isn't set in stone. We all have a part in making it.
That's right. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Thomas Schwartz's essay. We hope it gave you some new things to think about and maybe even inspired you to stand up for the things we all believe in. Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep working to make the world a better place.
Thank you, Eric and David. It was wonderful to see how you encapsulated and explained the thoughts and ideas developed by Thomas Schwarz. What great and inspiring thoughts they were. Subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and listen to our next deep dive.
But